I'm Phyllis Erlene Henline. The last name is Henline. My married name is Lesa, Lesa.
Lesa Ropeti, Aftai. My first name is Ropeti. I'm a Matai again. I hold the title of Lesa in the village of Samoa. And
Why did you do the name?
huh?
Why did you do the name?
Yeah, is the recording?
Yeah, we're recording. It's fine. Don't worry.
Oh.
We're going to be cutting and pasting, so this will
Okay.
this will look
No,
fine
we
by
were
the time we're
talking
done.
about
Okay.
certain questions that we're going to be.
My first name is Ropeti, which is Robert in English. But my Matai name is Lesa, which is also my last name. Lesa is the major high chief of the village of Sakitoa in the district of Alipata.
Alright, so to start off our discussion today, we'd like to talk a little bit about both of your lives growing up. Were you born here in Samoa?
Yeah, well, let's start from now and go backward. Okay, we are here. We're serving a mission,
Okay.
and we're with the service center department here. I work as an auditor and a trainer. The title of that is LUAT, which is a local unit auditor
Area auditor.
area trainer. Okay, that's our title of our mission. We have a special assignment here. We'll be here for a year and a half. We've been on a mission now for almost 4 months. Okay. Now, my wife's going to tell you about where we met, right? Okay.
I didn't grow up in Samoa. I grew up in Magna, Utah. Left home when I was 23 years old. Went to BYU Hawaii when it was called Church College of Hawaii. And that's where we met while we were both attending school there.
Okay, I went to school here in high school. I grew up here. I was born and raised here in Samoa. That little village that I said I was a Matai. Okay, that's where I was born and raised. Now I went to Pesenga school here. You know, Pesenga is a church high school here. Graduated here from 1963. Left here on the same year, and I was on my way to Hawaii, to BYU Hawaii. It's church college at the time.
Were your parents members of the church growing
No.
up?
I was the first member.
How did that happen?
Well, I was attending school here before I was a member, and once I learned about the gospel, I was introduced to some, gospel lessons from most of the teachers at the time were all missionaries. As a matter of fact, 100% of the faculty member then were all missionaries. So it's pretty easy to reach those who are non-members, I remember Sister Hall.
Phyllis Hall,
Phyllis Hall.
ironically.
Yeah. She was the missionary that taught me at Kidman. And this is where my family were non-member. However, in this particular village, because I'm what they call the Sao. Sao in the village is the main chief of the village. The Methodist church that is still there now was brought in there by my grandfather. That was his church. We were Methodist, so I grew up as a young boy in the Methodist church until I came here to Pesenga. Anyway, one of the weekends, I went home from here to spend the weekend at home, and when I got there, I noticed we used to have a very high Samoan type folly with foundations about as high as this building here. It was above everybody in the village. So I could see from the road when the bus stopped that there was something important going on. There was usually in those days they didn't have electricity. They used what they call kerosene lamp, or so whenever they lit that special light, which is about this time, then you know there's a sign that something important going on. And that was my nephew. It's just been released from the hospital. He's been very, very sick. As he was released from the hospital after 3 weeks, and he was sent home to die. He was about 3 years old. And when I got in there, the Faifeau, or the minister of the Methodist Church, was there, saying probably the last prayer meeting before he died. I guess it's customary in there in the church. Anyway, I went up to my mom, who was holding the baby like this, and he says, "Can I go over to Malaila, which is the next street where the Mormon church is located, and get the elders to come and minister to to my nephew?" And she said, "What is that?" Because just let me go get those guys. Anyway, I grabbed a bicycle. That was the only means of transportation that we had. It was one bicycle for the whole family. Anyway, I went over to Malaila. And about this time, the missionaries that were there were just getting home from proselyting. And that's why I asked them, and he says, "Okay, go over." So we went back to Sakikoa, however it is, and the senior companion, when they went in, he says to the people there, let me say it in Samoan, because his Samoan was very impressive. He says, "Yeah, le mamalu le mauta. Apa pea ele aise se ele te tongu I nei sauni. Amole mole tula." Meaning, what we're about to perform, if there's anybody here that's against it or doesn't want to, he can leave. Nobody left. Anyway, they went ahead and did the blessing, and as soon as they finished, they sat down, and not very long, the kid opened his eyes and screamed. So my mother reached over, and get one of the bottle of water that they sugar. They tried to empty it. Anyway, that was a miracle that was performed in my family. To allow the elders and the gospel to be introduced to my village at the beginning. And so my nephew is still alive now. He lives in Australia. He's a member of the church. Yeah, 2 years later, well, a couple of months later, I got baptized. And of course, I graduated that year. And I left to go to the States. So 2 years later, they all became members. I think that was the way that the Lord had provided to kind of soften their hearts, because they didn't have anything to do with the elders. So right now we have about close to 60, 70 members in my village that are members of the church. We're just waiting for a chapel to be built there. I'm sure the whole village will become Hamonga.
You might mention that Lesa was the first bishop.
Anyway, so for my family, my oldest brother was the bishop for 10 years in the Malaila ward. And then he's father of this child that was sick. And his son, his oldest son, was also a bishop for many, many years. He's just been released. So within my family, I've been a bishop. My oldest adopted son has been a bishop. We've had out of our 9 boys, of our children, 8 served full-time missions. So we have very strong testimonies in the gospel. Oh wait.
I didn't grow up in Samoa, so I don't have any stories.
Well, there's still a good story there. How did you end up at BYU Hawaii?
I'm a small town girl. I always wanted to go to college. I got a small scholarship as soon as I graduated from high school, but it wasn't enough to go to college, so I went to work. I worked for 5 years, and BYU seemed too big for me. BYU Provo. University of Utah was too big for me. I was pala'ai. And so I'd heard about the Church College of Hawaii. I had a dear friend from California who had been in Hawaii, and we'd always talked about going to Hawaii on a vacation sometime. And I guess it's kind of a miracle. I think I was meant to be there. I was working for Hercules Powder Company, which is a defense industry. We had several contracts with the United States government building secret projects. They're not secret anymore. The Minuteman missile and the Polaris missile and first and third stages of the Minuteman rocket that got the spaceships up to the moon. And I was typing a secret document, and if you make a mistake you have to void it and write down the number and the reason that it was voided and everything. And I was about halfway through that document, and without even thinking, I was typing the document, I just ripped it out of the typewriter and put in a clean sheet of paper and typed a very brief letter to Church College of Hawaii, Laie, Hawaii. No zip code, nothing. That's all I knew, was it was in a place called Laie, and I didn't even pronounce it correctly. And asked for information about attending school there. Within 2 weeks I'd quit my job and was on an airplane headed for Hawaii to go to school, because it was a church school and it was small, and I wasn't afraid.
Now,
I traveled 3,000 miles by myself,
Wow.
but I wasn't afraid to go to school there as much as I was. I guess I'm antisocial or something.
I was going to point out the irony there. Was this your first time traveling such a distance?
My first time on an airplane.
And now, when you first arrived there in Hawaii, what were your thoughts? I mean, that was a different Hawaii than we're probably used to today.
Somewhat, but still not as remote as Samoa was when we came here.
Were there many other, at BYU Hawaii, did you find there were many other women who were from America?
Oh no, there were just a handful of us. There would be more who came during the summers for summer school and a holiday, but regular students, probably a dozen or so. Were there that many?
Yeah, the ratio then between the Polynesian students and the mainland students was something like probably 10% mainland.
Yeah, they were trying to
90%,
keep it.
yeah.
They were trying to keep it for the Polynesians, but I didn't have any trouble getting in. I had never sat an SAT, and they accepted me on my grades and my letters of recommendation, and put me on what they called a provisional acceptance. And then I took some exams when I got there so that they could place me, and I was placed in the advanced courses. So I guess they figured I knew enough that they would accept me there.
Now, from both of your perspectives, let's start with you, Sister Lesa. What was the first time the two of you ever met?
I remember this differently than he does.
Good.
I was with my roommate. She was 16 years old and I was 23. I was on the older end. And we had gone to Hukila Beach they had a carnival there. And we were walking home, and he stopped to talk to us for a moment. She was in one of his classes, Sligo, I think it was, one of his classes. And he stopped to talk to her, and she was with a male friend from Tonga. Wasn't her boyfriend, but a male acquaintance from Tonga. And I was the third wheel. And he stopped to visit with her and offered us a ride home. And she got up in the front seat with him, and I got in the back seat with her Tongan friend. And had some music on the radio, and I started whistling. And he looked in the rearview mirror and he says, "Who's whistling?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "Women don't whistle." And I said, "This one does." And that was all I remember the first time I met him. And the next time I saw him, he was the Prince escort for the Miss Samoa for the Nahoapono ball. And I was dating his friend, and we traded dances. So I danced with him. But I don't think we ever went on a date. That was early on, and we didn't date until somewhere near the end of October. And I'd been there since the end of August. So I'd seen him several times before we actually went on a date.
I don't really remember any of those little things. I was too busy working.
Where were you working at?
I work at the PCC and some jobs, cleaning jobs on campus. I was too poor to didn't have any time to waste. I worked my way through school. I didn't have a scholarship or anything, so it was pretty tough. Not much leisure time then. You remember a lot more than me.
How did you? I understand it's incredibly hard to receive such a wonderful opportunity of going to like a school like BYU. How did that work out for you? How were you able to make it to BYU? How were you able to make the airfare? Things like that.
You know, when there are 10 of us in my family, and I was the first one to finish high school. And one of my older brothers was sent to New Zealand in 1955, so he can work and earn my fare to Hawaii. It was all planned. My mom planned all of that. So when I graduated, he was able to earn enough money for me to pay my ticket from American Samoa to Hawaii. That was my brother. That's how I got there. And then I worked, my first job was picking pineapple field.
All summer long.
Summer long. And my on-campus job was cleaning the bathrooms. We started at 3 o'clock in the morning and everything ended at 5. So we did that. It was a daily thing that we did there, a weekly. And before that, I
2 jobs at PCC.
I had 2 jobs at PCC. I was the manager of the theater there and a tour guide. So I took around a lot of VIPs, celebrities. I had the opportunity to take Mrs. Kennedy,
Jackie
Kennedy on a personal tour, just the 2 of us. And that was 64. She was still wearing black
morning
with your
clothes.
It was an interesting woman in a sense. She didn't talk very much.
He was in Elvis Presley's film.
Yeah, I was.
Blue Hawaii.
I was the driver
He
of
drove the
Elvis
cart
Presley's car.
around the village.
I had the opportunity to be in the movie business. I didn't want to lose my student visa. You know, for foreigners to be there, you have to get a foreign visa, which is I-20. That's the visa for foreign students to come to the United States to go to school.
Okay, tell them what film they wanted you to work.
Yeah, it was an audition for the Hawaii.
James Michener's Hawaii. And they wanted him to be that big Hawaiian boy that went off on the ship
but
and
I didn't want
come
to change
back.
my student visa. Yeah, otherwise I would have been.
So how did you end up arriving here in Samoa?
You want me to start?
Okay. When I graduated from BYU, I was 69 now. That's when I graduated, but then I started working there up to the summer of 1970 as a English specialist for the district there. It was a traveling type job. And I was looking for back home. Anyway, this opportunity came. It was the last thing, I think it came about 2 days. So I decided to take it. Very low pay, but I wanted to come home. And that was that's what brought us to American Samoa. The Mapusanga High School, it used to be the church school that was closed in 1974. Anyway, that's how we got here. And when the high school was closed, I moved to, and I actually didn't move, I stayed right on the same campus. But the American Samoa Community College moved over to the facilities there, and it became its home there. So I stayed right
only
there.
a year old
Yeah,
when
only a year
you-
old, yeah. And I stayed right there and worked for the community college for what, 27 years.
About.
Yeah, and then we're both retired from there. So she started off as an elementary teacher there. Yeah, and
Elementary teacher for 6 years, and then I taught at the college for 10 years.
What subject did you teach?
English. That's interesting too. I had said once a long time ago at BYU Hawaii, I worked for the counseling service. I was the executive secretary for the counseling service. Once we decided to get married, I quit school and went to work, and I worked right there on campus. And Dr. Garside decided to do a vocational interest test with me. She ran the test and she told me, the best thing that you could do, because your interest and your aptitude all show that that's where it points, is to be an English teacher. I said, number one, I never want to be a teacher, and number two, if I was a teacher, it would not be English. Never say never. Never say never. It'll catch you every time. So I ended up being an English teacher, but it's partly his fault because he was interested in the English language. And he would always ask me, which is right, this or this? And he'd give me two choices, and I'd tell him which one was right. And he'd say, why? I don't know, it's just right. Why? I don't have a rule. I don't know why. Well, you ought to have a rule. It's your language. So I started studying my language.
And now your English is phenomenal. Was it always like that, or was that?
I didn't speak a word of English until I was about
15.
15. That's the first time I entered any school.
Formal school.
I was 15 years old when I started Marist school. Yeah.
And for you, we have the obvious question: what was it like arriving in Samoa? How was that choice? How did that feel?
Well, shortly after we met, he told me his greatest desire was to return home and work with his people. At the time, we weren't thinking of being married or anything, but as we continued to date and we decided to marry, I figured if that's where you wanted to go,
Finally convinced her.
Didn't take a lot of convincing for this Pala'ai girl who didn't want to go to a big university.
What were your first thoughts of Samoa?
Well, we flew over in the daytime. That's when flights came in broad daylight instead of at midnight. And I saw a lot of thatched roofs. But there were also a lot of tin roofs because they had been hit by a hurricane while we were in Hawaii. And so they changed a lot of the roofs and built hurricane houses, but there was still a lot of thatched roofs. Lots of rainforest. And I looked out the window and I had a 2-year-old son with me, and I was expecting our second. I looked down there and I thought, boy, this isn't very modern. And then I thought, well, my mom had 7 kids, and she had me right after World War II broke out. And she had 3 during the Depression. I thought, well, she did it and she survived, so why can't I? And he had always made it easy for me. He said, do you think you could go for 2 years if I signed a 2-year contract? And yeah, we'll make it like a mission. So that was, I figured I could handle anything for 2 years. But I really liked it. My only concern was I didn't know whether I'd be able to get around and do things because I didn't speak the language. But most of the people in American Samoa spoke English. And so I just learned the language a little bit as we went along. I still don't speak very fluently, but I can get by. But that was my main concern, was the language. Not so much the lifestyle, because I figured I could adjust. But I loved it. When we went back to BYU in Provo for his doctorate in 1978, we'd only been there for about a month, I think. He came home from work one day. He was working full-time and going to school full-time. And I was staying home with the children. We had, how many did we have then?
6 family from Manu. 6.
Yeah, we had six children with us. And I was expecting my 6th, because we had one of our adopted with us. And he came home from work. I was staying home with the children, and he came home after they were in bed. And I was just kind of staring out the window, and he says, what's wrong? I want to go home. And he says, I just took you home last weekend, home in Magna, Utah. I said, no, I want to go home to Samoa. And that was after we'd spent, 8 years in, no, 4 years in Samoa. And Samoa had become home to me, and it's been home ever since.
Were you able also to visit his family in Western Samoa?
Yes, we had been in American Samoa for just a couple of weeks when his father came, so I met his father, and that wasn't too bad. We'd been married for 5 years, so it wasn't too hard. I was still concerned about his mother, but she came over a few weeks later, and I met her, and everything went fine. They're very loving, and they were very forgiving of me, my broken Samoan, and I didn't know a lot of the Samoa then, but his mother was very patient in teaching me the Samoa. And then I think it was probably about a year later that we finally, was it a year?
Yeah.
We finally came over here to Western Samoa to visit the family. And I fell in love with Western Samoa right away. I love it. I like it much better than American Samoa.
So did you move here?
No. We have visited many times, but this is the first time we've lived here. We came over for our mission. But we've visited many times. And I like the rural part a lot better than I like the city. I don't care for cities.
So you mentioned you grew up in Utah. Was it a strong LDS community that you were raised in?
Pretty much. I actually had 2 of my childhood friends were Catholic. They lived on the same street as I did, and the third one was LDS. But neither of us were active. My mother was inactive. My father was not a member, but my 2 older sisters were active. And so if it hadn't been for my 2 older sisters, I wouldn't have been raised in the church. When they married, my mother was concerned that I would stop going to church, so she started going to church with me. When I turned 18, my father joined the church. So I come from, my mother's side of the family is pioneer stock, but she, like I said, she wasn't an active member at the time. But fortunately, I I grew up enough in the church that I had a strong testimony by the time I left home.
So coming to Samoa, did you notice any differences in the religious community or the lifestyle of the church?
Oh, not our church so much as the other churches. The people in Samoa are very active churchgoers. I mean, Sunday, you see everybody in church on Sunday. The one thing that I did notice was our church was an everyday church, where the other churches were Sunday churches. But as far as our acceptance as being members of the church, it wasn't any different here than it was in Hawaii or anywhere else, as far as that goes. I mean, you find ostracization. Boy, that didn't come out right.
Get ostracized.
You can be ostracized, and you can see it if you look for it. But if you're not looking for it, I mean, I just always chalked it up to people's curiosity. We were Mormons, and it was a mixed marriage, and people were curious, and I'd answer their questions, and I didn't take offense, or I could have, I suppose, but you can turn a bad thing into a good thing if you don't take offense.
And did you attend English-speaking ward in American Samoa?
No. When we first got there, there was only one stake, and there was not an English-speaking ward. And the school more or less assigned us to which ward we were going to attend, because they divided the Palangi teachers up into more than one ward. They separated them so that they could have leadership in different wards. The ward that we went to was mostly Samoan speaking, however they did speak English from time to time. And then when there was an English speaking ward, I chose not to go. I decided to stay with my husband and children and go to the Samoan ward because I wanted my children to speak Samoan.
That's why
And
they
they're all
all speak
bilingual.
Samoan.
They're all bilingual.
So the children picked up the language pretty fast?
Yes. They grew up with both languages. And then he was bishop, and so I became Sister Bishop for a long time. And I was never Sister Lesa, because my mother-in-law was with us, and she was Sister Lesa, and I was Sister Ropeti. And then he became bishop, so I became Sister Bishop. And then when he was no longer bishop, we had a son who was also a former bishop who had carried the same name. He was bishop in another state by then, and so I was still not Sister Lesa. My daughter-in-law became Sister Lesa, and I'm still Sister Bishop.
Now living in Samoa also, there's a lot of cultural differences from America. Were any of these prevalent in the church as well? Did you notice anything from the Samoan culture and the church culture?
Not really. I didn't notice too much. When we first got there, a lot of the sisters and the brothers they weren't sitting as families. The brothers would sit on one side of the chapel, and the sisters would sit on the other side with the children. That didn't last very long. I think probably only a week or two before the bishop was starting to tell the membership that they wanted them to sit together as families. But I noticed that in the other churches, even today, I think they're still pretty much segregated. The women sit on one side and the men sit on the other.
Besides that, there are quite a bit of Samoan culture that's in conflict with some of the church teaching, which is they're trying to,
The suas and stuff like
yeah,
that.
you know, when you have guests, they usually want to show their hospitality by giving special food, and they give their best to the guests. That's a very, very active, everybody, you know, that's got to be the hardest part of the Samoan culture for the people not to practice, because that's the way they do things. Well, you know, if you receive guests, you give them the best you have. You know, I grew up in a family where we used to raise pigs and all this stuff. And every time we have what they call a favelave, they slaughter this big pig, and all we did was just feed them. We never seen one piece of meat from that. We just give them away. You know, it's just the culture. And it's very difficult because a lot of our members here are converts. You know, they used to belong to other churches. So there's still very much, those cultures very much exist in their heads. They're still trying to practice that. You know, and they're working on it, but it's getting better. It's getting better.
Improving.
Yeah,
I know when you were bishop, some of your elders quorum president and the high priest group leader wanted to do all of that, and you
I
put a
try
stop
to,
it.
you know, because to me, you know, some of them are so poor, and yet they even borrow money so they can put up this nice reception for you, you know, and that's the most difficult part, is to try to discourage that people practice. See, I'm an auditor now. We go to the villages, and you know our bishops don't get allowance. Okay? We go out there to audit, and at the end of every audit, got a big meal. You know, where did that come from? The bishop's pocket. And I know some of these bishops don't work.
They don't have the source of income.
You know, they don't have the source of income, and he just feels so bad because this is probably the weeks, you know, supply for their family that they're using to, you know, to be nice to us, because this is Samoan culture. So I tried to tell them, you don't have to feed us, you know. We ate at home before we came, so, you know, but let me fight for Samoa, you know, because it's the way they are.
Mm-hmm. And you can't refuse. It'll hurt their feelings.
You can't refuse because you're being rude. If you serve food, and you gotta eat it. Yeah. So if you're on some special diet, you can
you
keep
go off
that
the diet.
Did you feel like, as a bishop, you were able to have any influence on that situation?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, but when I got released, you know, when I was released, my other bishops who came after me, they go right back because they weren't strong enough to tell them no. You know? And so, yeah. But it's been so many changes though in Samoa as far as the gospel.
I know.
When I left here in 1963, there was only one stake here. This was the Pesenga area. Okay. You know how many stakes we have now?
In the whole island?
The whole island? 11 on Upolu alone. 5 in Hawaii, 4 in American Samoa.
When we first came,
there was only one stake. So the gospel has grown so much. You know, I'm glad that I've been given this opportunity to serve in this capacity, because I'm able to, you know, to travel to all of these sites, all of these new chapels, you know, be able to witness the growth of the church Gotta remember, I left here in '63. That's a long time, you know. I come and go, but I didn't stay here for any length of time. This time, I'm really getting the opportunity to really see all of this because of my assignment. You know, next Wednesday I'm going to Hawaii, and Hawaii is even bigger in geographically. You know, it's a huge island. You know, so in my assignment, I wear two hats. I'm not only the auditor, but I also train. You know, I train all of the priesthood leaders and how to handle the sacred funds.
I remember one thing that was very different to me. The youth dances. When we went to the first stake dance, the lights were like noonday. No dim lights. The parents were there sitting around the hall.
All the chaperones.
All the chaperones watching the
Sitting with their daughters
dance. They would let a young man come over and they would ask the parents, "Can I dance with your daughter?"
Bring her back after the dance.
The parents would say yes, and then they'd watch, and that young man knew that the parents were sitting there watching him dance with their daughter. He had to behave himself, and then he would escort her back to her parents once the song was over. And I think that they still keep the lights pretty high here.
That's not
of course, it's not the ballroom dancing like it was when we first came.
But you see a lot of those changes being infiltrated here. You know, you can see the young people holding hands and, you know, and be so passionate in the public. That was a no-no.
Absolutely not.
You do that in those days, you're taking your life in your own hands. But you can see that changing, you know, it's amazing.
I think it's the Western influence, TV and...
Well, and the young people are accepting that, and it's, you still, in most of the villages, you can't hold hands with your girlfriend.
Is that just something in our church, or is it more...
No, that's the Samoan culture.
Samoan culture.
Yeah. You know, they used to have the marriages with the, you know, the upper echelon of people, the ranking. They're all arranged marriages. So your village will have to go to the next village, you know, because they usually marry taupo. You know what a taupo is? That's a top lady. And your whole village will go up there and negotiate for you. You don't even know who
you don't even know who you get to marry.
That's the way it used to be, you know, but it's so many changes now.
I know as a college teacher, I used to have my students write essays, and I'd give them a list of topics that they could write on. I'd let them give me a list, and I'd put them up on the board, and then I would group them into larger categories and give them choices. And often they would choose to write about dating, and almost every single essay that I received on dating was, there's no dating in Samoa. If you want to get to know somebody, you have to sneak out, or you have to be with a whole bunch of friends, a whole bunch of guys and a whole bunch of girls, and you just kind of...
Better not get caught, though.
But don't get caught. And I had a lot of them complain that, especially the girls, my parents won't let me see this guy that I like because they've already picked a husband for me. And this is in the 90s in American Samoa. And I know it's a lot slower coming in Western Samoa for the older people to accept the idea of dating. So and of course that's inside the church as well as outside the church. Now in the church, the parents of course are looking for companions for their sons and daughters who are members of the church. and that's pretty difficult sometimes for the young ladies as well.
Some of the recent church teachings that have been given by our leaders about dating and marriage and things like that, has that been an influence, or what
Oh yeah,
has that
definitely. That's it. That has some influence in the church. You know, more and more younger parents are abiding by that, and they understand that it's the best thing to do. To know who the guy is, allowing them to come home and say, this is my boyfriend or this is my girlfriend. You know, they're accepting that, especially in the church. You know, they're accepting that it's instead of just sneaking around and
And I think it's also helping because they have said no dating until age 16, then group dating, and don't do the single dating until you're much older. And I think the Samoan parents appreciate that. It gives them a leg to stand on. They can say, no, the church doesn't want you to.
Yeah.
Where some of the other kids outside of the church, they're trying to reason with their parents and say, this is the way they do it in the United States. Well, and they're pushing for younger and younger dating, but the church has that standard, and it helps the parents in the church.
We have 3 daughters. None of them dated until they finished high school. Now that was just the rule in our family. Yeah. So they didn't date until they went to college.
As far as you know.
Well, as far as I know, because nobody went out on the date.
We kept them busy too. They were all involved in sports and family stuff, so they weren't in church, so they didn't have time to date. They didn't have time to sneak out.
So they didn't date until they went to college.
So you two are currently serving a mission for the church right now.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Do you have plans for after your mission? What do you plan to do?
We really haven't planned that far ahead.
Right now,
which is trying to finish this 18 months.
Right now we have 37 grandchildren. We've got 2 on the way. Yeah. This one that's visiting now, we'd only seen him for 2 months of his whole entire life.
He's the baby, the youngest son.
This is our youngest son. This is his only child. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for us to get to know this grandchild. But we've got 2 younger ones that we haven't seen. And some more on the way. So I'm sure that once the mission is done, we'll be going to visit our grandkids.
Yeah. That's the most difficult thing for us, is to be away from them and our grandchildren. Yeah, we're pretty close to them.
You've made an amazing sacrifice. We're coming to a close at this point. I would like to ask you, over the course of your life, how has your relationship with our Savior developed?
Steadily. Too slow sometimes. Through illnesses and difficult times especially, I've had no doubt that he's been there helping every step of the way. There are too many things that have happened in my life to be coincidence. There's no way, even up to meeting my husband. I told you how I ended up in Hawaii. I was supposed to be there. I said to a friend, I'm going to Hawaii to go to school because I want to get an education. And everybody who goes to BYU, they tease you and say that you're going to get your MRS. And I said, I'm not going to get my MRS. I'm going to get an education. There are only Polynesians there. I'm not going to date a Polynesian. I never dated a Polynesian. But I was supposed to be there. We met half the distance. He was 3,000 miles away from Hawaii. I was 3,000 miles away from Hawaii. and we met halfway. And that's just one of the things that happened. That there have just been coincidences that I just won't call them coincidences. They were meant to be. And I know it's because the Lord has been directing my path every step of the way. With every child, with every illness, with every up and with every down, and He's just been there. And the older I get, the closer I draw to Him. And I wish I had felt this way when I was a teenager.
Well, it's when I first became a member, I knew the gospel was true, but it didn't really have a strong testimony. When I left here, I was really looking at exploiting the opportunity to get to America so I could go to school there. And I ended up being there. And I'm glad that I went to school there, because when I first learned about the tithing, you know, the foreign students only work for the school, and your paycheck it's given out right at the office there. So at the end of every week, we go down there to pick up our check. Secretary will first give you the envelope, you know, and write out, this is your tithing, put it in the envelope and go. So I'm saying this because if it weren't for that, I never paid tithing, because I was so poor, you know, because the $5 that was taken away from little money that I earned in a week was quite a bit, but I was required to do that in order to keep working. And anyways, I developed at the end of my 4 years, I look back at what was going on. I didn't owe a penny to the school when I graduated. Some of my friends who came from Pango who work outside of the school, you know, they get their check. They had loans they had to pay because they didn't pay tithing. Anyway, but it's interesting that now I'm an auditor looking at how this tithing is being spent, you know, and I'm so glad that I was given an opportunity to learn about tithing there. And I developed my testimony there. When I met her, she was a very active woman, very faithful. So, you know, of course, like everybody else, it takes a long time to finally get to your testimony and better understanding of the gospel and His teaching. You know, I never look back. You know, I have a very strong testimony now. I've held several positions in the church, and there's no question in my mind that this is the true church. And our Savior made that atonement for all of us. He made the plan of salvation available for, you know, all human beings. You know, you just have to believe in it. And we're just hoping, even though our mission is not a proselyting mission, but there are ways to, got a lot of members that need to be strengthened, you know, in being honest and keeping the tithing and how to spend it. A lot of times they're discovered because they don't understand really the policies that govern all of these things, and then how to disperse the funds of the church. And we're hoping that Samoa will be not in the top of violating these policies. I'm hoping that, you know, I was telling Sister Lesa that that's why I'm working so hard trying to train, because it's on my shoulders. You know, 18 months I'm here. I'm supposed to train these people to respect the funds, the sacred funds of the church, you know. And I'm hoping that I'll achieve that by the time I end my missions. So there's some positive impact in the attitude of the people towards these funds. Okay?